Imagine being able to read real Chinese sentences like these without Pinyin, without English translation, and even if you're starting from zero, all by the end of this video. Hi, I'm Neale, a Mandarin coach with over a decade of experience, and our company Mandarin Blueprint has made thousands of people literate in Chinese ridiculously fast using what I'm about to share with you. So watch till the end and you will be able to master any Chinese character in literally seconds, including how to read, write, pronounce it with the correct tone like a native speaker. Learn dozens, even hundreds of Chinese words per day if you wanted to, and read Chinese subtitles, comics, even novels in 6 to 12 months learning part-time. Just an hour or two a day. Plus, by learning what I'm about to share with you, you'll automatically make way fewer tone mistakes and have more native-like pronunciation. So, how is all this possible in one video? Simple. We're going to tap into the awesome power of memory athletics. So in 2016, Katie Commode memorized 318 random words in just 15 minutes. In 2023, Orkun Abidov memorized 3,412 numbers in perfect order in 1 hour. And in 2019, Andrea Muzzi memorized over 1,800 playing cards, again in perfect order, in just 1 hour. That's 35 decks of cards. So these people are not superhuman. They're not geniuses or savants. They've simply tapped into a hidden mental power, a superpower that we all have. See, we humans are terrible at remembering abstract data like numbers, letters, or symbols like Chinese characters. But we are exceptionally good at remembering people, places, objects, and actions. So whether you're trying to memorize numbers of pi or Chinese characters, the approach is basically the same. You simply map out people, places, objects, actions to whatever you need to remember. So let's have a look at what you need to remember and know to fully know a Chinese character like a native speaker does. So we need to know the Pinyin initial and the Pinyin final. So for example, this character here is Sheng. We need to know the SH part and the ENG part, Sheng. And we need to know, of course, the tone. We also need to know the components that make up the character, which in this case would be, we need to know this bit and these bits and how they form together. And we also need to know the component's position. So for example, this bit doesn't go down here, it goes up here. And we have to remember that. And finally, of course, we have to know the character's meaning. So this system I'm about to teach you, it maps out people, objects, places, and actions to these different aspects of the Chinese character. So in this very simple, proven system that I'm about to teach you, people are going to represent the Pinyin initial. Actual people from your life, either personally that you know or famous people, celebrities. Objects, 3D objects usually, are going to represent the components, and how you imagine them and where you imagine them in your mind's eye will represent the component's position within the characters. Places are going to represent the Pinyin final, and they're also going to represent the tone. So the buildings themselves, so if you imagine like your workplace or a store that you like to go to often, or a house that you've lived in, or a friend's house or a family member's house, those buildings are going to represent the ending sounds of each Chinese character. And the locations within those locations, i.e. the rooms, are going to represent the tones. So for example, kitchen is second tone, the bathroom is fourth tone, etc. And then finally, the actions is where it all comes together. You're going to have your people interact with objects in a certain way that represents the character's meaning. So this system, we call it the Hànzì movie method. Hànzì means Chinese character. And we call it the movie method because it's like you're imagining mini movie scenes for every character that you learn. And it's all systemized, so it gets easier and easier, faster and faster as you learn and associate all these different Pinyin initials, finals, tones with people, places, and objects from your life. So we call people actors, we call objects props, we call places sets, and we call actions scripts. So all of this happens in just a few seconds. You create a mental movie where everything, the pronunciation, the tone, the positioning and layout of the components, and of course the character's meaning, is all embedded into a single memorable scene. Now, when you learn characters the old way, through rote learning, by writing characters over and over and over and over and over again, it takes ages to learn them, And then you constantly forget them because you have no real connection to them, and you're learning in usually a random order as well. So if you do it with the Hànzì movie method, you'll not only memorize the character almost instantly, literally once you get good at it, it takes a few seconds for each character, you'll barely need to review it. I've used this myself to learn 3,000 characters in just a few months, studying an hour or so a day. And we've since massively improved the method over several years of feedback and constant changes and improvements. So our course members are learning way faster. So Keith, for example, he learned 1,000 characters. Again, reading, writing, pronunciation, correct tone of all these characters in 11 days. Dennis recently learned 1,500 characters in 33 days. And I've got tons more examples like this. Here are a few more just flashing on the screen for you. Now, before we continue, here's a warning. You're going to have tons of questions as we go through this video, especially if you've never used memory palaces before. So I'm going to ask you just to keep an open mind for a few minutes, put all that aside, and just listen to what I have to say, because this is a game changer. And I'll be answering some of your questions throughout the video that I know are going to pop up, and I'll answer more questions at the end. But for now, let's just dive in and learn how to read Chinese using the proven techniques of memory champions. So let's start off simple with the character representing the number 1 in Chinese, yi. Now, of course, this is so simple that we don't even need to create a full movie scene for it. I don't want to insult your intelligence here. Some things are absolutely fine to just learn by rote through repetition. So this character is obviously super common. It means number 1 or in Chinese, and you'll encounter it constantly. It's so common and visually straightforward that memorizing it directly is totally reasonable. Same with 2 and 3. 1, 2, 3. However, even if we're not making a movie scene, we should still associate a prop with it, as in a 3D object that's going to represent this horizontal line. That's because yi shows up in many other characters as a component. Now, when choosing a prop, you can do it based on 2 things, appearance or meaning. So, for example, as a horizontal line, this could be a cigar or a lead pipe or a wooden stick, right? But based on the meaning, you could choose something that represents number 1. So Neo from The Matrix, or Jet Li from that movie, The One, which I really liked when I was younger, or someone you know that's extremely introverted from your life, or heck, even the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. Now, whatever you choose, do it fast. Don't think about it too long, but just make sure that it's something that you can imagine pretty easily and that you don't mind imagining. Now, I'm choosing a cigar because it's something interesting and it's something easy to imagine for me. Right, so let's choose our prop, whatever it is, and move on. Now, this next character is 人, meaning person. And as you can see, again, it's a very simple and very common character, and you could memorize this by rote. But let's just use this one to test out this memory palace technique and see what all the fuss is about. Now, this character has 2 strokes. Neither of these actually have any inherent meaning, so we'll base the prop for them, the 3D object in our mind, purely based on what they look like. So this stroke leaning left kind of looks more like a samurai sword to me. And as you can see, it looks slightly different because these are 2 different fonts, and it's good to get used to different fonts with Chinese characters. But as you can see, they are slightly different in their appearance. This one looks more like a samurai sword here, and this one looks more like a banana. So let's just associate a samurai sword and a banana with these 2 different objects, right? Now, it could be a samurai sword, or it could be an actual samurai warrior, maybe from the TV show Shogun, or maybe Tom Cruise from The Last Samurai. It really could be anything that you want, but I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to imagine a samurai sword. So we've got a samurai sword and a banana. And to fully learn this character, we need to choose an actor related to this R sound. And we need to choose a set related to the EN pronunciation, the Pinyin final. Finally, we need an action or a series of actions, a script that will create this movie scene and represent the idea of person to us visually. Now, it's very important that you choose an actor, whether it's someone in your life that you know personally, or it's a famous celebrity or a famous person from history. It's important that you choose someone that you can imagine quite clearly in your mind, and ideally that you know well. Now, the reason why that's important is because you're going to imagine this person coming up in your mind to memorize hundreds of characters most likely, and to make them memorable and easy to remember, you could incorporate elements of their personality into the scene wherever possible. And I'll demonstrate this as we go through. So for the letter R, I am going to choose Robert Downey Jr. Now, do I know him personally? No. But have I seen pretty much all of his movies? Yes. And he is basically the same in all of his movies. And he has this kind of like witty, sarcastic kind of style to him. But you go ahead and look at this list of famous men and choose one that you can imagine pretty clearly that you know relatively well. Or maybe it's your Uncle Ron, is someone from your family that is associated with the letter R. You can always change them later. And you may be wondering why we're choosing a man as opposed to a woman. That will become clear later as well. So once you've got your man associated with the letter R, let's make this movie scene. For me, it's Robert Downey Jr., but you've got your R actor, whoever that is, and a samurai sword on the left. That's very important. So you have to imagine it on the left, and then the banana on the right. And we are in an EN location. And when choosing a location, ideally, again, it's somewhere that you know well. You can close your eyes and walk around it and know where you're going and where each room is and roughly what's in each room. You don't have to know every single stick of furniture and every color of every curtain, but you have to know the rough layout of the place. So choose somewhere that you know well. This could be your home, homes you've lived in before, your friends' homes, your family's homes, workplaces, gyms, shops, stores that you go to often. Don't worry if they're small places or if they're big. The most important thing is that you know them well. And ideally, you have a lot of what we call episodic memory associated with them. So essentially, episodes of your life have been played out there. You have a lot of emotions and memories associated with those places. Now, in total, you're going to have to choose 13 sets or buildings from your life, which is not that many, and 50 or so actors in these 4 categories. So these ones are the male, these ones are female, these ones are fictional, and this one here is just kind of like a wild card group of 6 actors that you can choose later. Now, if we'd have used the original Pinyin chart for this, we'd have 20 or so actors and like almost 40 sets. And places are way harder to imagine, especially that many, than actors. So we kind of flipped the Pinyin chart around, made some tweaks. There are only these 13 sets, and there are 50 or so actors split into these 4 different categories. And if this is starting to sound complicated, don't worry, it'll become really straightforward as soon as you actually start learning some characters. Just know that the standard sort of initials are males, anything with like an E sound. So for example, E or me, and all of their associated sounds here are female. Anything that's kind of like a oo sound. So we've got oo and pu and tu, nu, lu, etc. These are all fictional actors or animated characters. And then finally, these U sounds. So U, nu, lu, ju, chu, shu. It's only 6 of them. They'll be the wildcard group. This could be any group of your choosing where you can just visually in your mind's eye and just separate them on site. So it could be Harry Potter actors or communist leaders. That's what some people have chosen, or members of a certain sports team. Totally up to you. So I'm imagining my childhood home, got Robert Downey Jr. And because it's second tone, he's going to be in the kitchen. And here's why. So first tone is going to be outside the entrance. Second tone is the equivalent of the hallway or kitchen. Now, if you don't have a kitchen in the particular place, maybe it's like a library or something, then that's fine. Just imagine the equivalent of that location. You decide on the borders of your own sets in your mind. Third tone is the living rooms or bedrooms or the equivalent. Fourth tone are the bathrooms or backyard or equivalent. And fifth tone, which is very rare, but it does come up occasionally, it's going to come up today actually, is on the roof. So now let's do our scene. And it helps if you close your eyes, so do that if you can. So in this scene, your R actor, which in my case is Robert Downey Jr. in full Iron Man gear, but without the helmet on, picks up a samurai sword and slices a banana in half. And out pops from the banana a naked adult person, all gooey and new, kind of like Neo emerging from that pod in the Matrix movie. So Robert Downey Jr. in his typical fashion looks at me, raises an eyebrow, and just sort of makes a witty, sarcastic remark as goo just goes all over the kitchen floor. So that's my story for Ren. So when I imagined that scene, I had the samurai sword on the left. So Robert Downey Jr. holding the samurai sword on the left. The big banana was just sitting on my kitchen counter on the right, and he sliced the top of the banana off, and out popped a human person. Now, I know to some of you that may sound insane what we just did, but by doing what we just did, we included the pronunciation, And this is exactly what the memory champions do, right? To learn decks of cards. We have the R, the EN, the tone. We have the meaning of person, like a human being actually being born as a result of the actions that our actor and the props took. And we even have the positioning of the two components. We have the samurai sword on the right and the banana on the left. Now, if you chose a different R actor than what I did, then maybe you could have a slightly different story. But whatever your components are, whatever your props, your actors are, your set, the concept is the same. You get your actor to interact with the props in a way that represents the meaning of the character. And ideally, the props are in the same position as the components in the character. It's very useful. As you're learning this character, you can say it out loud, the scene, if you want. But most important is that you write the character out just once or twice. You don't have to do the rote learning thing, just while you're doing it. So, okay, Robert Downey Jr. with a samurai sword, he cuts open the banana and out pops a person. Okay, cool. And then just move on. There is some magical connection between the hand and the mind. So do write it out once when you learn it at least, and maybe another 1 or 2 times when you go to review it, at least for the first few times you review it. When you go to imagine these scenes, and you'll learn this as we go to the next few characters, do not worry about getting the perfect scene. Okay, it's not about crafting an Oscar-winning movie here. Just make the associations vivid, quick, and personal. Reviewing later will help you reinforce what you forget. So, for example, you go to review this character, you forget the right side component. Oh, I need to imagine the banana more clearly. Or, do you know what? I remembered everything except for the initial. Oh, okay, I need to imagine my actor doing something more obvious so I remember him or her. Or, do you know what happens sometimes? I remember how to write the character. I know how to pronounce it. What the heck does it mean? I forgot what it means. That means you didn't represent its meaning enough in your imagination. Now, before we move on to the next character, this character is a component in other characters, just like E is a component in other characters. And so this character, Ren, it can be like this, as you see it, or it could actually be sort of squished form. This happens quite a lot in Chinese. You have a certain component, it's squished to the left to represent meaning in another character. These two are actually the same, but they're just different forms. But they're visually different enough that we should imagine 2 different props for them. And again, when it comes to props, we can choose it based on 2 things, right? Based on how they look and based on what they mean. So, Ren means person, right? So we could maybe imagine a mannequin, those drawing mannequins used for art. Or it could be someone that represents mankind, maybe someone super manly and tough, like Chuck Norris or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Or we could base it on what it looks like, which I often prefer to do. So this kind of looks like an umbrella. But when it's squished to the side, I'm going to choose Chuck Norris. Now, if Chuck Norris doesn't gel with you, maybe you're too young, you don't really get the reference anymore, you don't really know the memes and stuff, go ahead and choose someone else that's super tough. Maybe that guy that plays Jack Reacher or something like that. And once you've chosen your props, again, we move fast. So we're just going to move straight on to the next character. So I've got Umbrella here and Chuck Norris. Now we're going to learn another character. This one is made up of Umbrella, as you can see, and a new component, which is a vertical line. Now, I previously chose a cigar for that horizontal line, but for this one to me looks like a stick. So I'm going to go with not just any old stick. I'm going to go with a staff. I used to practice martial arts when I was like in my teens. I used to use the Shaolin staff. And so I'm going to imagine an actual staff. Now, for our actor, we need a male associated with the letter G. So I'm going to go with Gary Oldman, who's probably one of my favorite actors. And specifically, I want him to be like the Gary Oldman from Leon the Professional, who for me is the most memorable. But you can go ahead and choose from any one of these on the list. So once you can pause the video if you want, go ahead and choose one that stands out to you, or choose someone from your life that represents the letter G. Maybe you've got a best friend called Gary or an uncle George, whatever it is. Go ahead and choose your person real quick, and let's move on and create our scene. Now, before we create our scene, we need to choose another set. The set here is E, so that's a new set. I'm going to go with my grandfather's house. I used to spend a lot of time there when I was a kid. So you go ahead, just choose any other building from your life that you know well. It doesn't matter that much. Choose it, and that is now going to be your E place. So you've got your G actor in your E place, and it's fourth tone. Okay, so it's going to be in either the bathroom or the backyard or the equivalent. Now we've got all our elements together, haven't we? We've got our G actor in the bathroom, let's say, of our E place, and we've got two props. I've got my umbrella and my Shaolin staff. Maybe you've got slightly different props, that's okay. But for now, you can just go ahead and choose the ones that I've chosen, so we could just make this go faster. So now we've got to think, okay, how can I represent the idea of individual? How can I write this script in the simplest, fastest way possible? What is a visual way to represent the idea of individual? Here's how I'm going to do it, and then I'll show you what I did and how easy it is even to turn the most abstract looking meanings into concrete visual representations. So Gary Oldman is surrounded by identical copies of himself in my grandfather's bathroom. He's frustrated because he's just one of the crowd. He wants to be individual. He wants to stand out. So to stand out, he gets his big black umbrella and he opens it, and he's a bit more satisfied. But because he's Gary Oldman, he's like the bad guy from Leon the Professional. He's not satisfied with that. So he takes out a big Shaolin staff and he whacks everyone else down. All the other Gary Oldmans, he knocks them down. They make sounds like bowling pins. One goes, smashes through the shower door. Another one lands in the bathtub and knocks the tap off. Water's going everywhere. Another one smashes through the window. It's chaos. But now he's alone and he's the individual. Mission accomplished. So you notice that I involved the location a lot when I did that scene, just like I did for Ren in the last character. I didn't just have a banana, it was sitting on the kitchen side. The goo, when the human being came out of the banana, it was landing on the kitchen floor. I was involving the location. That's quite important, otherwise you might forget or find it hard to remember where you were, which specific room you were, which building you were in. Now, some other key techniques I used, the idea of contrast. So if I wanted to show individual, I first show the opposite of that. So this is actually really good script writing for whether it's a YouTube video or a TV show or a movie. They want to get to somewhere. The character wants to get something, but they are currently in the opposite situation. It's like the hero's journey kind of thing. So he wants to be individual, but currently he's just one of the crowd. And you should visually show that representation. There's also emotions involved. There are sound effects. There's multiple senses. These are all very, very important elements to add into your scenes. So go ahead and imagine that one more time while you write the character. So it's written like this, from top to bottom. So we've got Gary Oldman, umbrella, and then knocks everyone down with the staff. Okay, moving on. Next character is Da, meaning big. And this is going to be with a D actor. That's another male actor. And we've got a new set, our A set. So go ahead and choose another place right now, a building that you know well. And let's choose your D actor. Now, for me, it's going to be Donald Trump, right? I'm going to imagine Donald Trump because, it's so memorable, right? There's so many things I could do with that because he's just got such a unique personality, right? I can imagine lots of mannerisms he could involve in his scenes and lots of things that he could do. But if you'd like to choose someone different from this list or someone from your life, go ahead and pause the video, choose that right now, or just do it off the cuff. Go with David Beckham or David Blaine. So you can sort of start to see this coming together now, can't you? We're chunking up information. That's why this method starts off slow as you're sort of building up all the elements. You're choosing your actors, you're choosing your sets, you're choosing your props. But very quickly, things start to get exponentially faster because now we have these two components, these props that we've already chosen, right? And we're just going to combine them together. So what is E? It's the cigar. And we've got Ren, this particular component, is represented by umbrella. And the positioning of these components is fairly interesting. So this is how it's written. Cigar and then umbrella like that. So we can try and think about that when we're making this scene. So I'm going to choose for A, my set is going to be my friend's house in Melbourne, Australia, which I went to recently. I've been to multiple times. And so I know very well. And my D actor is Donald Trump. I've got my D actor there with a big cigar and an umbrella. And I have to show the idea of big. So let's incorporate contrast again. So he's normal size, he's not big. Maybe he's even a bit smaller than average, right? And Donald Trump starts puffing on this big cigar whilst he's holding this umbrella. In fact, do you know what? Just to make the umbrella stand out a bit more, I'm going to actually put it on the ground and he's sort of sitting in the umbrella or standing in the umbrella, right? And as he puffs on the cigar, every puff makes him bigger and bigger and bigger. And he gets so big by the end of the scene, after a few puffs that he's actually a huge giant, and he starts crushing like parts of my friend's garden, including the umbrella that he was sitting on as well. My friend Calvin comes out and goes, "Oh my goodness, what have you done to my house?" He's reacting to it. Okay, done. So we've just learned that character, and we've used, again, senses, multiple senses. We've used sound effects as he's like crushing the fence, and movement is also very important here. Emotions, exaggeration. Like he wasn't just like a bit bigger, he was like a huge giant towering over the entire house, right? And I've also got people related to the set coming out, which is Calvin, or, his two kids could be there, or his wife as well. So that's also very cool. You can add in elements like that. So if it's your auntie's house, you can imagine your auntie coming out. Or if it's your workplace, you can imagine your boss. So once you've imagined that scene in a similar way with your actor and your props, go ahead and write it out as you think about it. Say it out loud maybe a couple of times. Think about the scene, write it down, and then move on. Once you get good at this, it literally takes like seconds. Like you can do this in like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds max for each character, and it's just burned into your memory for a very, very long time. Let's move on to the next character. We've got a new actor and a new set, right? So this actor is represented by the letter T. So go ahead and choose one of these people, very, very famous people, whether it's Tom Cruise or Tiger Woods, Tony Robbins. I'm going to go with Tony Robbins because I saw something from him quite recently. So I've got Tony Robbins for myself. You go ahead and choose your T actor in a new set. And this new set for me is going to be my mum's apartment in England. Now, my mum's apartment is not very big, but that does not matter. Once again, it's more about how much emotional memories you have associated with that place, or just how well you know it, right? So with that in mind, let's move on and learn this character really quick. So this is another abstract meaning, similar to individual, right? It's abstract. Too, as in too much, right? So we've also got 2 new props. One is big, the character that we just learned, is also a component in other characters. And this one, which is often referred to as a drop, it's one of the key strokes in Chinese characters. So for da, I'm going to imagine something that is representative of the meaning of da. Now you could imagine a starfish, right? Because it kind of looks like a starfish, whatever. As long as what you're choosing is actually representative of how it looks or what it means, just choose whatever you want. But I'm going to go with a big dog for this one, like a big Saint Bernard dog. That's what I'm going to go for. So for drop, I could potentially choose an eyedropper, or I could choose a paintbrush sort of dripping with red paint or something like that. I kind of like that idea. That's just for the purposes of this video. Yeah, so I'm going to go with Tony Robbins in my mom's bathroom with a big Saint Bernard and a big paintbrush full of red paint. Now, how do I associate that with too much? Well, again, contrast. So not too much and then too much, and exaggeration would be really good for this. So I'm going to imagine Tony Robbins, he's got the Saint Bernard there, and he's sort of sitting on a big Saint Bernard like he's riding a horse. He's got the paintbrush, he's painting red paint all over the bathroom floor, and my mum's there watching, just in horror. And her horror just sort of grows as she realizes that he's doing it way too much. And he's just got more and more paint, and the whole floor is just becoming red. Even the bath is like filling up with red paint, and it's just becoming an absolute nightmare, right, for my mum. So she comes in and she's there with her face, just like, oh my goodness. Sort of similar to how my friend Calvin was in the Australian place with the last character. That's it, right? So too much, too much. I could even have my mum saying too much like that. Now, people saying words can be really effective as well, like narrating the scenes. It depends on what sort of learner you are. If you're a more oral learner, like you're good with sort of sounds and stuff, that might work for you, or it might not. You can try different senses depending on what your strengths are. I'm going to write this once. I'm going to use blue this time because why not? So I've got my Saint Bernard, Tony Robbins, and I've got paintbrush, too much red on the floor. All right, great. Let's move on to the next scene. So we've got another actor for this one, which I'm just going to go with Leonardo DiCaprio, super famous guy. You can go and choose from one of these people, or again, someone personal from your life. Once you've chosen a good L that you like, imagine them in your E place, whichever that was. Now, for me, it was my grandfather's place. Remember Gary Oldman? Ge. What did ge mean? What did that look like? Individual, right? You can start to recall the scenes quite easily, can't you? It's a little taste of the power of this. We'll do the character review in a bit more depth after I've finished teaching you these really common characters. So the E place, this time it's going to be on the roof. Now, if you've never been on the roof, that's okay. You can just go there and just do your best and imagine what it looks like from the roof. And you can even imagine it from different angles. You can start off, for example, on the front driveway and then jump on the roof. And that could be part of the scene, okay? Just so you can remember it easily. So we've got Leonardo DiCaprio, for me, whatever your L actor is, whoever that is, on the roof of your E place. And then we've got 2 new props. This one kind of looks like a Spock's ear, right? Or an elf's ear. So you can imagine an elf. I'm going to go with Spock. I never really was a Star Trek fan, to be honest, but I just, who doesn't know Spock, right? I just know him really well. I know who he is, and I've seen the movies and stuff, the Star Trek movies at least. So I have some recognition of him. So I'm going to use him as my prop. And then this one here looks kind of like a hockey stick. So that's what we're going to imagine. All right. So Spock and hockey stick, or elf, if you don't want Spock. All right. So I'm going to imagine a scene. So we've got Spock is on the top, right? And then we've got the hockey stick at the bottom. So just Spock holding a hockey stick and doing something would work. Now, the change particle, this is like a grammatical particle. There's no need to get intimidated by this, but basically whenever, Chinese doesn't conjugate verbs. So you don't have eat, ate, eaten, thank goodness. You just have 吃, you just have one character. But to conjugate it, if you like, you don't change the character, you just add in other characters like le, and there's another one that's very common, which is guo, like to show that it happened in the past in a different way. This is just how Chinese works, and this is not a grammar video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's basically what this character does. It represents change. So it says, I hadn't eaten before, now I have eaten, or 吃了, right? So that's what it does. So for the purpose of this method, we simply need to think, okay, how can I show and represent the idea of change in this movie scene? So I've got Leonardo DiCaprio and Spock and a hockey stick on my grandfather's roof. Let's do this. So I'm going to go for contrast again here, because change inherently involves visual contrast. So Leonardo DiCaprio cast a spell on Spock, transforming him from this logical, serious person into a silly clown. And Spock actually changed into a clown. He gets makeup and he gets like some funny clothes and stuff like that. And then he jumps on this hockey stick and starts jumping around on the roof and making funny noises. And Leonardo DiCaprio is just in stitches laughing at this guy. Now, because this is the roof and it's harder to remember the location than it is for other things, I might imagine different angles and close-ups of the situation. So I imagine him like he's like breaking the tiles on the roof and they're all falling down, just to involve the location a bit more. And I reimagine the movie scene from different angles as well, and that further cements this as real. You can also even add in slow motion. And we call all these things I just described special effects. They're just ways of enhancing the movie scene. And you should start using these if there are some scenes that you find it difficult to remember. So just go ahead and imagine the scene again, writing out the character. So Leonardo DiCaprio casts a spell, makes Spock jump on the hockey stick like a clown, changing him into some sort of different person. Okay. Now, before I move on, I just want to mention one very important thing. Do not write down your movie scenes. This is a common thing that many of our members, when they go through the course, they just start doing, right? We don't ask them to do it, but it's just a natural thing. You want to do this, right? Some people write paragraphs, actually write the whole story out, which completely defeats the object. The object of this is to save time, a ridiculous amount of time. But if you are writing down your scenes, that's bad for 2 big reasons. So number one, it takes way too long and it's just unnecessary. You don't need it. Number 2, it actually makes you worse at the method. It's like the equivalent of training wheels. So if you always have to write down your movie scenes and you're not really trying to remember the character, real learning happens when you are trying to recall and retrieve information from your brain. That's called active recall or retrieval. It's scientifically proven to be incredibly effective. So the process of going into your brain and reliving these movie scenes to try and remember how the character is written, how it's pronounced, etc. This is incredibly important for building neurons and connections and actually learning for real. Okay, so do not write down your movie scenes. If there are parts about your movie scene that you forget when you go to review it, just go in your mind and fix it. Maybe you forgot that it was a L, it was an L sound, and you need to imagine Leo or whoever your L actor is more vividly. So let's move on to the next character. This next character is pronounced yeah, and it means also. And finally, we're going to introduce our first female actor. And the reason why it's female is because, as you notice, it could be an E or the letter Y, because it's spelled with a Y. Either way, it really doesn't matter. So just choose a lady from this list or a lady from your life representing or related to either the E or the Y sound, and let's move on. I'm going to go with Emma Watson. And look at that, we'll be in my granddad's house again, or, your E place again, because it's the E set. And we've got 2 new props. So we've got my Shaolin staff or stick, and we've got 2 new props here. This one we call the pincer because it kind of looks like half of a pair of pincers. So I'm going to imagine an actual crab for this. You can go with lobster, or you can imagine a pair of pliers if you like. It really doesn't matter that much. And then this one looks like a hook. So guess what we're going to choose? A giant hook. So I'm going to go with a fishing hook for this one. So it's going to be written something like this. Okay, so it's going to be pincer first, then the staff or stick, and then the hook. But they're all kind of like smushed together, so it's not a huge deal where they're placed. So in this scene, we're going to be in the 3rd tone location of your E place. So for me, I'm going to imagine my grandfather's big living room with the blue carpets, the widescreen TV, the big yellow ugly sofa, right? I can imagine Emma Watson there, and we've got a crab, and we've got a Shaolin sort of staff, and we've got a big fishing hook. So immediately I think of hook, I think of crab. That just naturally works. So she's going to put this crab on the fishing hook, and then she wants to also put everything else in the room on the fishing hook. Emma Watson's for some reason obsessed with putting everything on this hook. So she takes like a vase and she puts it on the hook, and she takes like an ornament from my grandmother's ornament, and she puts it on the hook as well. And then she looks around, she looks at me, she's like, you, and she wants to put me on the hook as well. And you know what? My grandfather's actually there. He's there with her, and he's protecting me, right? He's taking a big staff, and there's this moment where he takes the staff and he sort of tries to hit her, and she defends herself with the hook with the crab on it. And there's this moment, sort of like this snapshot, where I see my grandfather in his living room sort of like connect with her fish hook, if you like. And it's like this snapshot that represents everything in the scene in one moment. I used to call this the Kodak moment, but it's something where ideally at one moment you can imagine all the elements of the scene sort of amalgamated together. And something else that's really cool about this, which I didn't realize this until later, but my grandfather actually passed away recently in the last few weeks. And this technique, a little bonus that you get, is reliving moments with your loved ones that may have already passed. And that's something that came up in our community recently. And I thought this is just really cool, like aspect of this that didn't really predict going in, So once you've imagined that scene, let's move on straight away to the next one. Now, as you can see, this next character is made up of the character we just learnt, but as a component again. This is an important concept to grasp. It's called chunking, right? So we've taken those 3 different components that we just learned, the pincers, the staff, and the hook, right? And the combination of all 3, and we just combine them into a single prop now. And for this one, I don't know who thought of this one, but this one, I'd like to represent it by a scorpion, right? This component here, because that's what it kind of looks like. If you look at it, it looks like sort of the scorpion's tail there as well. So it looks like it enough to call it a scorpion. But you could also come up with a prop that's representative of the meaning of also, if you like. That's absolutely fine. But I like scorpion, so I'm going to go with that. And here we've got scorpion, and the component that we learned right at the beginning of the video with ren, meaning person. It's like the squished version. So this is the manly man component, right? So I chose Chuck Norris for this. Whoever's the tough guy for you, you go ahead and choose that, combined with the scorpion, and that's going to represent he or him. And we don't have to choose a new actor or a new set. We just go with T, which is for me is Tony Robbins, and the A set we used for da to learn the character for big, which for me again is my Australian friend's Australian house in Australia. All right, so we've got the actor, we've got the set, we've got the props. Let's go in quickly and go for he and him. How are we going to get your actor in that place? It's going to be outside the front entrance of that place, like the driveway or the equivalent, and you're going to be using Chuck Norris in my case and a scorpion to represent he, him. Now, if I just told you that, you might just be super intimidated. Like, how the heck am I going to imagine he and him? But again, now that you know some of these cool techniques and approaches to doing this, it makes it really simple and straightforward. You just use contrast, right? So I have, for example, Tony Robbins. And if you know what Tony Robbins looks like, he would not make a very attractive woman. He's like 7 foot tall. And you've got Chuck Norris there, again, on my left, right? So for me, it's like he's on the left, and then Chuck Norris is there, and he's got a scorpion here, and he's like pointing the scorpion at Tony Robbins, telling him to take off that dress and that wig right now. You look silly, take it off and turn into your original self, become your male version of yourself. And so Tony Robbins sort of acts in, and this is quite funny because obviously Tony Robbins is massive, but you got Chuck Norris, who's even more scary, of course, threatening him with this scorpion, and Tony Robbins takes off his dress, and then he immediately is this like, in this really nice sort of Mad Men-esque suit, representing a really strong sort of male look. So we're adding in that contrast again. We've got maybe even a few sound effects, but we've certainly got a lot of emotion. Like Tony Robbins looks really terrified of Chuck Norris, as any person in their right mind should be. And of course, also another important thing throughout this whole video, with every scene that we're making, the props, the components, the objects in your mind's eye are always doing something. They're not just sitting there. Like we had Donald Trump sitting in the umbrella, right? Even though the umbrella wasn't really doing that much in the scene, he was sitting in it, so it became part of what he was doing. Or we had Emma Watson, putting the crab on the hook, right? They can't just be sitting there like holding them. They've got to actually do something with them, and ideally something that makes sense for that particular object. So this character is probably the most complex one we've learned so far. So write it out. There's Chuck Norris, and then Scorpion. Okay. Threatening Tony Robbins to turn into a man again. All right, cool. That he and him. Done. Now we're going to move on to another character. Super common. In fact, all these characters are probably in the top 50 most common characters. So you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck with these, and you'll see what I mean very shortly. But this one means no or not. It negates things, and it's pronounced bu. And this is our first fictional actor. So again, these are all the males here. These are the females. These are the fictionals. And these are the sort of the wild card, which can be anything. So this actor we're going to choose is in the animated or fictional category, and it's going to be associated with the letter B. So I'm going to go with Bugs Bunny, but you go ahead and choose any one of these if you like. We've got Bane, we've got Bo Peep from Toy Story, we've got Beavis or Butthead, we've got Bender from Futurama. Whoever you want, just go ahead and imagine them. And then we've got our cigar, we've got our samurai sword, and we've got a new component or a new prop, which is going to be the magic wand, because this actual component is an ancient character. It doesn't mean anything anymore, but it used to be representative of magic. It represents a crack in a tortoise shell, which is how the ancient Chinese people used to predict the future, right? So that's how old this language is. So literally, I think this one's like 5,000 years old, this character. It's crazy. But anyway, it means magic. So let's associate this with a magic wand, okay? Now, this means bu, no. So we have our Bugs Bunny or our B animated actor with a cigar and a samurai sword, and then we have magic wand. Now, how are we going to combine these together to represent no? So, of course, he's going to be smoking the cigar. I mean, what else would you do with the cigar? Whilst holding the magic wand. And when I approach Bugs Bunny with this samurai sword, Bugs blows out smoke and firmly says, "No," while he points the magic wand at me, and he sort of magically takes my samurai sword out of the air. And there's this slow motion moment where I could just see all these three props doing their thing. So I've got the cigar blowing out smoke, magic wand, sort of floating samurai sword, and they're all kind of in roughly the position that they should be in this character. And that snapshot again, where I can imagine all the elements visible in a single mental image, represents this character enough. Now, I might go through that again. I might just make sure that Bugs Bunny is angry, and he's saying, like, he's making sure that the idea of no and not happening, buddy, is like really clear in that scene, because I think that might be a weakness of it. So just really imagine that well, but don't obsess over these again when you first do it. Just make something that seems about right and move straight on to the next character. And this is how you literally can learn 50 characters an hour. Our peak, and many people in our community have done this too, learning like 100 characters a day using this method. But the only way you could possibly do that is if you just keep it simple and don't obsess over things, and just trust that this actually works. All right. So we've just done our Bu character. Go ahead and imagine that one more time. Maybe write it out again. So we've got samurai sword, we've got cigar, samurai sword, magic wand. Okay, cool. And then we'll move on. We've only got 5 more characters to learn, and we're going to speed this up. We're going to sort of smash our way through these last 5. And every single one of these characters you're learning, remember, is super common, and it's going to unlock a very large percentage of the language. Okay, so it's really worth doing this. Let's go on to Zai. Zai has got your Z actor, which for me is going to be Zach Galifianakis. Go ahead and choose from this list, if you like, a different male actor. And once you've chosen that, let's go back to our I place, which again for me is my mother's apartment in England, where we learnt the character meaning too, as in too much. By the way, let's see if you can conjure up anything from that movie scene. I'm guessing that you probably can. And then we've got 2 new props. So we've got this one that looks kind of like a gun. So that's what we're going to imagine, like a gun in a holster, like an old-fashioned like Western revolver. And then we've got our Shaolin star for me, or stick. And then here, this is actually a character that represents soil or earth. Now, usually, going through our course properly, you would actually learn this character first, but this character is not very common. So I didn't want to teach you that character first and spend that time on that. But so we'll just take this as it is, and it's just it almost looks like a gravestone in the ground, right? If you look at it like that. So once you've got all your elements, let's imagine them together. We've got the gun first, and then we've got sort of the stick there, / staff, and then we've got the gravestone right there. Do you know what? For this, I'm not going to imagine a gravestone. I'm going to imagine a potted plant, because it represents soil. Yeah, I'm going to imagine a potted plant. You could go a gravestone if you like. Just sort of tweak your story. So Zai there's not really an English equivalent to this, but essentially it means located in English. That's the closest definition. So let's just go with that. So an important point to remember is that when you try and think of the idea of like, oh, I've got to make one actor interact with 3 different objects, like in one go, like he doesn't even have 3 hands. Like, how is he going to interact with all these different things and all remember it? That could be a challenge. So what you can do is bring in copies of the actor. So you can imagine 2 Zach Galifianakis, right? Just kind of like I did with the character Gur, meaning individual, with Gary Oldman. Or you can bring in people from the set, like I did with my granddad with the staff. So I'm going to do something similar, but I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to have the staff, and I'm going to be trying to like move the plant pot, I think. So he's really particular about where he wants the plant pot, but he puts it in a silly place because he's Zach Galifianakis. He puts the plant pot like in the sink. And he's like, yes, that's where it's located. And he's like sort of being like an interior designer. He's like, yes, that's perfect. Yes, I like that location. And I go in there with a staff, and I'm like, no, maybe it should be moved over there. And he just gets a gun out and points it at me and says, no, it goes there. And he starts being very angry and very serious. And I put my hands up and I drop the staff. And so that I can imagine be very good for location. So I'm going to imagine that one more time. So I've got the gun. And he holds it up like that, because it's like above, right? So it's above the other 2 things. We've got the staff being dropped on the left there. I got the potted plant over here in the sink. And I think that represents Zai quite well. Locate it. Yes, good. So let's move on to the next character, Yol, meaning to have. And we have our gun again. And this time we have another prop. This one represents the component, meaning moon. So guess what the prop's going to be? It's going to be a big moon. And we're going to have our Y actor or YI actor coming in again, which for me is Emma Watson. Imagine Emma Watson or whoever you chose for your Y actors for the year, the also movie scene. And then we've got a new set. And this new set is going to be my office, I think. Yes, somewhere I come pretty much every day. I'm very familiar with. You go ahead and choose a new place that you know very well, that you can roughly, in your mind's eye, you can imagine yourself walking around in. And imagine your YI actress is there. And she has a gun, and there's this big moon as well. Of course, the gun's going to be above. Guess what I'm going to do again? You'll do this a lot. You'll sort of redo the same actions with the same objects. If something works, just do it again, right? So I'm going to do that holding up the gun like this again thing. That seemed to be really memorable for me. And then we've got a moon and the idea of to have. So that's, again, have is technically an abstract, but you can imagine that. You can, how do people manifest that in their actions and their emotions, right? And their gestures, right? Emma Watson, she's in let's say my office. It doesn't have, well, actually, technically it's an apartment. But this is basically an apartment, so it does have a bedroom and stuff. But I don't use it. So I could also imagine the living room. So I'm going to put her in the living room for the third tone. And she's just like maniacally holding on to this big, beautiful moon. She's just like amazed by it. She wants to have it, right? And I try and take it off her. In fact, I don't imagine myself. I imagine the landlady that I know, because she's associated with this place, obviously. And so she comes in and it's like, can I have the moon? And Emma Watson just like grabs it and points the gun at her and says, no, it's mine. And that's it, right? So simple, but very visual, got emotion. It shows the meaning of the character. It's got all the props being used. Perfect. Move straight on. So moving on to shi, another incredibly common character, meaning to be, right? To be, like, or am or are. Again, no conjugation. Thank you, Chinese. So we have shi. That's going to be our SH actor. It's going to be a new actor, and it's going to be a new set. This set is called the null set. So it's got some weird symbol that just basically represents nothing, zero. And that's going to be quite common with the tweaks that we've made to the Pinyin chart. So here's the original Pinyin chart. You see that there's all of these finals here, and no null final. But here there's a null symbol, meaning there's no initial. So all of these pronunciations have a final, but technically they have no initial. None of these letters or sounds go at the beginning. It's just I or an or o or whatever. But because of how we've changed the Pinyin chart, it's kind of the opposite way around. We have one null actor, right? Which could be anyone, doesn't matter, just someone representing some male actor. So anytime you're learning a character with these pronunciations here, or these pronunciations, or these pronunciations, they're going to be in the null set. Oh, and this like wild card sort of R pronunciation as well. And as for exactly how that works and why and all the explanation behind it, you don't really need to know for this method to work. All right. So if you don't quite understand it at the moment, don't worry. Just let's keep learning characters. So this next one is shi. So let's imagine a male actor. I'm going to go with Sean Connery. You can go ahead and choose one of these guys. And once you've got that, we've got two new props. So we have this one representing sun, and this one here representing rocket launcher. It doesn't mean that in Chinese, obviously. But as you can see, it kind of looks like a rocket launcher, right? You can imagine this is the rocket on top. This is the trigger here. And this is like the person holding it. It's like ren, you see? So anyway, that's our reasoning behind it. So we've got rocket launcher and we've got a sun and to be. So I have Sean Connery, and he's in my null set. Now for the null set, I'm going to choose my last home before I moved here, which again, lots of memories there, and I can definitely remember that very easily. And the null set will come up particularly often because of the way this works. As with any set, just make sure that there's a lot of memories associated with it and you can like walk around it in your mind's eye relatively easily. So I've got that place. You've got that place too, right? Go ahead and choose that new place. And then your SH actor is there. It's fourth tone. So I'm going to imagine the bathroom of that location. And I've got Sean Connery. He's sort of, I'm thinking to be, to not, and not to be. I'm thinking like Shakespearean, something from the Shakespeare play. I believe that's Hamlet, right? And so I've got Sean Connery holding up, what is it, this side, holding up the sun, and he's got the rocket launcher pointed at it, and he's like, to be or not to be? And then he says, he looks at me and he says, not to be. And it's like, in his Sean Connery way, and then he just blows up the sun in slow motion. That works for me. And then just to add an extra layer on that, just to make sure that I know the meaning, it's like everything, like after the smoke clears, there's just nothing there. Like it's just me and Sean Connery floating in space, right? So nothing is B anymore because of what he did. Again, got the sun. He was holding the sun up, right? Because the sun is above. And I'm going to write out the character just once while I remember the scene. I'm going to move straight on. Now it's got two more left. You're doing great. Last two characters. This next one is ma, meaning horse. So we've got the M actor. I'm going to go with Mel Gibson. It's another male actor. You go ahead and choose from this list someone that comes to mind that you like, that you know. And then we've got the A set once again. So again, my friend's house in Australia, wherever your A place is. No, we're going to go to the living room or one of the bedrooms because it's the third tone or the equivalent. And we've got two new props. Because this component here first shows up in this character, which means horse, we're just going to call this one horse's head, right? Now, it doesn't have to be like the Godfather movie scene, that horse's head. It could be like those toy horse heads that with the stick that like kids used to ride on in, I guess, like the 40s or whatever. And this one looks like a toilet, this next one here. So that's what we're going to imagine for it. So it's going to be like your typical toilet. We've got like let's just call it a toy horse head thing, not the other thing. And then we've got the cigar here. All right. So I've got Mel Gibson. So he's sitting on the toilet, obviously, because toilet's on the bottom. And he's picked up a cigar off the floor and he's chuffing away. And he's very happy on the toilet in my Australian friend's living room. And, he's got like a horse's head toy thing while he's on the toilet and he's like playing around. And then in slow motion, a real horse, like this huge, strong horse just breaks out his head, like through the toilet through the floorboards. And before you know it, Mel Gibson he's dropped the cigar on the floor and it's like singeing the living room floor. And he is just on top of this horse with smashed pieces of toilet everywhere. And he's still holding his toy horse, and he looks at the toy horse and he looks down at the real horse and he's just so happy because he has a real horse and he throws the toy away and he just rides the horse away. That again, I could really imagine Mel Gibson doing something like that. I don't know why, but so we've got the horse's head and then we've got the toilet and then we've got the cigar on the floor. So he picked it up off the floor and then he dropped it back on the floor later, just so I can really remember that it was down there, like at the bottom of the character. We've got the toy horse at the top, and of course, the actual real horse coming out representing the meaning. I like that. So this character is not that common, right? Horse is not that common. But the reason why we're learning it now is because I want to just learn it for the next character. So you can associate whatever horse you imagined in that scene, like coming out of the ground. That horse that you imagined in that movie scene can now also be the prop for when this component is used in other characters, like this final character here, which is ma. Okay. So we've got a new component as well, or a new prop, which is mouth. And this is another relatively rare fifth tone character. There's literally just a handful of them. We're covering 2 of them in today's video. So ma is going to be, this scene is going to happen on the roof of my friend's house in Australia. Of course, it'll be whatever your A place is. And this means question mark. You just add this on to the end of certain sentences, and it just makes that statement into a question. So that's what we call it, the question mark. So we just have to show the idea of asking a question visually in this scene, right? So we've got this component here, which represents mouth. I'm just going to choose like a big floating mouth with big red lips and big white teeth, right? Just floating there. Again, I've never seen that in my life, but I could just imagine that very clearly. If you like, you can imagine just someone that talks a lot from your life, or some character that just like got a very big mouth, just always talking away. That's always worked well for me. Some people from our course imagine a big sofa that looks like a pair of lips. That's like a real thing that exists as well, apparently. And so I've got Mel Gibson, or my M actor, on top of the roof of my friend's house, and I've got a big floating mouth. Mel Gibson, I'm just going to continue from the previous scene. You can do that sometimes, almost like a TV series. So he's just broken out, and he's riding on this big, beautiful white horse, and he's smashed through my friend's patio door. He's now outside, and he climbs up on the roof, and we're up there together, like having a great time. And then he's just like going crazy, just enjoying riding the horse. And I'm seeing it all in slow motion, just absolutely destroying my friend's roof, all the tiles flying everywhere. And then suddenly this big mouth just comes out of nowhere and gives him a big, wet, sloppy kiss on the face. And he just stops in his tracks and looks at me, and he's just like pointing to the mouth and just like dripping wet like that, and just like saying, why, what is this? Like asking lots of questions. And his body language is showing that he's asking lots of questions. That's enough for me. Okay. So now just go ahead and write that. Imagine that one more time, involving your actor, of course. And then just say mouth. That's how we write. Again, so going through this method properly with our course, you would actually learn this character first. This is actually a character, but we're just sort of skipping a few steps so we can speed this process up a little bit for you for the purpose of the video. So we've got mouth, we've got horse, and that means question mark. Okay, great. Now it's time to take a break. You've just learned a ton of really common, useful characters, and there may be lots of questions popping up in your mind. You may be thinking, okay, maybe this method could work for some people, but first off, I don't know if I'm creative enough to do this on my own without Luke's help. All right. I don't know if I can just make up these scenes without you. Well, first of all, yes, you can. It's a skill that is not that hard to learn. But second of all, you don't have to if you don't want to. We have an entire course that teaches you 3,050 common characters, and as well as that, 11,800 plus common words, all the way to HSK 7 to 9 level advanced fluency. Okay, and we just have step-by-step suggestions for every single character, every single prop choice, every single actor choice, sets, etc. And you can just copy the thousands of comments that people leave with their scenes and their ideas. And some of you may also be thinking, this seems really complicated just to learn some characters. You have to learn, 50 plus actors and memorize them, and the movie scenes, the sets, the props. There's so much to remember. And yeah, it's all systemized and everything, but isn't it better if we just write the characters out over and over again? Well, the short answer is absolutely no. Because it takes like 10, 20, maximum 30 characters before you absolutely nail this. And of course, most of you, if not all of you, watching this video probably already started to get to grips with this and started to nail this method as well. And I'll prove that to you in just a sec when we review. But picture this, right? All these dots here, that's 3,000 dots. It takes this many of those dots to fully master this method and make learning characters take seconds and be almost effortless and super easy to remember and recall for the remainder of your journey with this language, right? But if you go the other way, just writing them out over and over again with no system, no mnemonics, no proven way of memorizing and retaining everything, then you're just going to be constantly writing them down, constantly forgetting them, constantly trying to learn them again, and it's just going to be an absolute nightmare. Trust me, I've tried it, and I'm sure many of you watching this have also tried that method. It doesn't work. Oh, and you'll also be mastering the pronunciation at the same time. That's huge. That's massive, right? Most people, even with another mnemonic system that memorizes the characters, they have to go back again and memorize the pronunciation. You may also be thinking that your visual memory is not that great, and maybe you have something called aphantasia. You can't memorize or visualize things very well. And yes, that does exist as a kind of like a disorder, but it is a spectrum. First of all, like it's just like blindness is a spectrum. It's not just like you see everything and you see nothing. It's like there's a spectrum there. You can use what you have, right? And also people with aphantasia or people with difficulty visualizing things, you still have memories, right? So you can picture a movie scene in some other way that you've seen before, right? So if you, for example, remember a great book or a childhood memory or your favorite movie, how do you remember that? You use maybe other senses, use other ways, right? So there's always ways around this, even if you have weaknesses in this area of visualization. So let's stop learning characters for now. Let's do a little review before we move on to learning words, which, by the way, learning words is even faster, way easier than learning characters. So here's an easy one. What does this character mean? How is it pronounced? What are the props that make it up? Ren, meaning person. Can you imagine the movie scene that we did? Who did it involve? What happened? Walk your way through it. How do we say too, as in too much in Chinese? How do you write the character? You can pause the video if you want, if you need to have a second to think about it. What are the props that make it up? What's the actor involved? What do they do to represent too much or too in that movie scene? Tai. How close were you? How much did you get? There might be certain elements that you didn't remember or you couldn't quite grasp, but I'm guessing you remembered a lot of this, if not all of it. How is also pronounced in Chinese? What are the components that make up the character? What does the character look like? Can you try and write the character? Pause the video if you want. Here it is. How right were you? Let me know in the comments. What about he or him? What does the character look like? How do you write it? What is it pronounced like? What's the pinyin initial, as in the actor? What's the final? Some of these may take a while. Some of these you might not be able to remember. One of the things that you might not be able to remember that well is the set spelling. So here, for example, A, because we didn't create often. So when we do the full method, often we'll create mnemonics to remember the sets, the 13 sets that we have. But generally speaking, I'm confident that most of you watching this got most of these characters correct, or most of the components of them. Here are all of the characters you've learned so far. Based on the questions I asked, I bet you got many right, even if you started from zero when watching this video. That's the power of memory athletics and memory techniques. We now have at least 14 characters in our arsenal. And from here, we can learn numerous compound words that are also really common. So there's not many we can do that are actually common with just these few words in terms of compound words, but there are a couple. So for example, 大人 means adult. Literally, what does it mean? Big person. So as you can see, Chinese words are incredibly logical. They're kind of like the word playground in English, right? Literally like 95, 98% of them are like that. It's really obvious, really logical. Whereas only a tiny percentage of English words are like that. 个人 means personal. So we've got individual, person, personal, right? Again, very logical. Just relying on logic alone might not be enough to forever memorize these characters. And that's when you can bring in mental images connecting the sounds or characters to the English definitions as well. Similar to the Hànzì movie method, but much simpler. There's no rigid system of actors or sets. You just imagine whatever comes to mind. So for example, 大人 is big person. You can use contrast. So imagine a baby, any baby, right? Growing into an adult and then continuing to grow into a giant. Maybe like a real giant, like Andre the Giant, or just someone huge, like a basketball player, or like the BFG from that movie, the BFG. And that's it. The word is now learned, right? It's now cemented in your mind. You can move on to the next word. You can literally do this to learn hundreds of words a day if you wanted to. Another example with 个人, if you already know what the characters mean, you can leverage your existing movie scenes if you want, right? So you might imagine Gary Oldman choosing among his clones. He's looking at all the people in his clones from his movie scene, and he's counting them. Again, it doesn't have to be with the umbrella or whatever, but he's just counting them. And then he sort of chooses one and he particularly likes it and he hugs it and saying, this is mine, my personal Gary Oldman, right? You can just let your brain make these associations and just move on. It takes literally seconds. So what does personal conjure up for you? How can you represent that visually and connect it with either the pronunciation, 个人, or the characters? In fact, even without knowing the characters, you can still easily learn Chinese words. So for example, if you didn't know these two characters, you can learn it purely based off of the pronunciation, 个人. So 个人, it sounds like green, something personal, like personal bag. I imagine a personal computer that's green. So I can imagine me hugging my computer and it turns green. Or 个人, 个 sounds like a growling. 人 sounds like a bird, a ren. That's a kind of bird. So I can imagine a bird, like a wren, snatching a fish from the river, saying, this is mine, and growling or something like that. Yeah, there's so many ways that you could make this association. So now you've got a bunch of characters and words in your arsenal. Let's put them together and see what we can actually read and understand in Chinese. So just follow this sentence by sentence. You can pause the video if you like, because when you're going from individual characters to actually reading a sentence, especially if you've just started, you're a beginner watching this video, it can take like a few seconds for each one. It's really quite slow, right? So, and that's fine. That's completely normal. So have a look at this sentence. What are the three characters involved here? Take your time. 他在吗? 他在吗? He located, question mark. Right? So even if you know all three characters, you remember the meaning, that still might confuse you a little bit. And that's where we go sort of make the jump from knowing individual characters and words to actually reading and understanding the language. But the cool thing is, if you know the words and characters, you can get the meaning pretty easily, especially if you have obviously a translation to sort of teach you what the meaning is, and then you just remember these rules naturally. That's how we learned our native language, right? So for example, here, 他在吗? The actual meaning of it, he located, question mark, is he located, right? Is he here? So this is used all the time. 在吗? 在吗? Located? Are you located? Or is he located? Is she located? So like, is that person present among us so I can talk to him or her? Try and read that out loud right now. 他在吗? You've just learned a ton of stuff. Like your brain might be a bit overloaded with information right now, especially if you're a beginner, because you've learned all these components that make up all these characters, as well as the Pinyin pronunciations and the Pinyin initials and finals and the meanings. And now you're sort of now throwing grammar into the mix. It can be quite hard to sort of deal with all this information. But that pain, that confusion is amazing. It's like that means you're growing. That means your skill is developing at an alarming rate. Not alarming, a great, amazing rate. Okay, so this next one, 他不在. 不 is a fourth tone. 他不在. That's how you would pronounce them individually. But when the language flows together as a sentence, 不 here is actually pronounced as a second tone because it has a fourth tone after it. So it makes the language flow better. It's just a natural thing that happens with Chinese, okay? There's not many of those rules, so don't worry. 他不在. What does that mean, do you think? You can sort of infer what that means now, right? He, no, or he not located. He is not here. What about this one? Now, if you want to really test yourself, go ahead and pause the video and actually try and remember each of the pronunciations of every character and read it out loud to yourself. So I don't want to give it away too early if that's what you want to do. So I'm just warning you, every time you see these new sentences I'm going to show you, just pause the video and try and say it out loud and try and remember movie scenes for each one, right? And cement your knowledge of them. 他也不在吗? He also not located, question mark. Is he not also located? Is he also not here? Or is he not here either would be, I guess, the most smooth translation into English. And this is how you learn grammar, guys. You don't study grammar. You just see the words behave in their natural habitat like this, and you infer the grammar. You acquire the grammar naturally by getting tons of audio and visual examples like this. So, okay, in Chinese, we say he also not here. We don't say either at the end or two at the end. And we don't have different words for either and two. It's all just yeah. And you start to figure these things out as you read. Okay. It's always slow and a bit painful, confusing in the beginning. But again, that's good pain. It's not the kind of confusion like, oh, I've been doing Duolingo for 800 days in a row. Is it actually working? Like, not that kind of confusion. This is like, okay, I know what's here. I know these on a deep level. I know not only every character, but every component here and how to pronounce them as well of every character. And it's just a matter of my brain, my subconscious brain, my incredibly powerful subconscious mind just sort of connecting the dots. Now, you can speed that up with a bit of grammar study if you want, but it's not necessary, okay? And grammar study, like looking at grammar rules, can actually be a dangerous thing. It can be a bit of a time sink and a waste of time. Because at the end of the day, if you just consciously look at grammar rules, your conscious brain is, no offense, but pathetically weak compared to your subconscious brain. I've heard some studies say that it's like 500,000 times stronger, your subconscious. So let the subconscious sort of drink it in and pal, if you like, sort of soak in the language, but lots of listening and reading and also repeating. That's great for speaking as well. And you'll eventually just get things. And many things you'll just get straight away. So we're starting to have a little conversation or dialogue, a little story, if you like, going on with just these minimal number of characters that we've already learned, right? So, 他也不在. Now, if you've got the first three sentences, I'm pretty sure you could probably get this last one, right? He also not here. That's how we talk in Chinese, by the way. There's not really like a yes or no. In many situations, it's just repeating the positive or the negative aspect back, the person, a piece of information back to them. He is also not here. 他也不在. 马也不在了吗? Horse also not here. 了吗? All right, so now we've got a little grammar thing here. Again, what is the le? It's the change particle. So we could remove it, and it's absolutely fine as well. It makes sense. 马也不在吗? Is the horse not here also? But when we put the le in there, that indicates that the horse, but through context, we can understand that the horse was there, but now he's checking, is the horse not here now? Is the horse also not here now? Basically what it's asking. 马在. Chinese is like that. It's almost like caveman language. In some ways, 马在 is like yes, basically. So it's saying no, the horse is here. 马在. You could say 是的. That's kind of like a yes, but often it's not done that way. Often it's just take the person, piece of information, and repeat it back. 也有人在. 也有人在. Also, what's this character here? 有, to have, right? Also have 人在. Now, 有 means to have, but this is another grammatical thing. It just naturally pick up as you start to read and understand the language, right? 有 also means there is or there are in Chinese. 有也有人在. So saying 有人吗? 有人吗? Are there people here? Like if you walk into an empty place and you want to say, is there anyone here? You just say 有人吗? 有人吗? So this person is now saying, the horse is here. 马在. There's also another person here. There's also people here or a person here, depending on the context. Let's continue. 他是一个人吗? 他是一个人吗? So he, 是 is to be, right? So here it's saying he is one person or a person. Ma is the question mark. Now, depending on the context, right? Chinese is much more contextual than English. So this could literally be asking, is he a human? Right? 他是一个人吗? Is he a person? Maybe if we were walking through the script of a sci-fi movie, that would make sense. But here, 一个人 actually means alone, right? One person. I am one person. So it's like, 我是一个人. So it's saying, is he alone? Is he on his own? And now the person is switching their view to the horse again. 马 to big change particle. 太大了. 马太大了. Another grammatical thing. You just start to pick these things up very quickly when you know the characters. This is how you say to. Now, you don't have to add the le every time, but generally speaking, these are often used together. So you have to, so 太, whatever the adjective is, le, right? 太什么了. So 马太大了. So it could mean super big, really big, or it could mean too big, as in like too big to fit into whatever. Again, Chinese is very contextual. 马不太大. 它也不大. Now, by now, if you got the previous sentences, especially if you want to pause the video and just sort of process these, remind yourself of these characters. Maybe even try to write the characters and remember each pronunciation. Remember your movie scenes and your actors and your sets, what they were doing. Recall everything component by component. 马不太大. 它也不大. The horse isn't that big, not too big, that big, right? So that's how you pronounce, like, express that in Chinese. He's not big either. 他不是大人吗? So he's saying he's not big either. 他也不大. And then the next person is asking, he 不是 means not to be, right? So is not 大人 adult. 吗? Is he not an adult? Or isn't he an adult? 不是. No. 他不是大人. Well, actually, 不是 in this case is actually confirming, yes, he is not. So that might be getting a bit confusing now. But no, he is not an adult. 他不是大人. 他有马吗? Does he have horse 吗? Does he have a horse? 有. Again, instead of saying 是的 or so instead of saying yes, we just repeat the pertinent piece of information back. So 有 has. Yes, he does. Now, maybe, again, it's hard to really make a in-depth, detailed, complicated story with so few characters. But just imagine that there's another guy that they've just discovered there with him that they didn't see before. And he's like, oh, 他也有马吗? 他也有马吗? This is often a point of confusion. Tone change rules again. So we've got the 不, right? 不大. So it changes from a fourth to the second tone. Here, 也有. So 也有马, all third tones, right? But when you have two third tones together, again, just to make the language flow better, the first one changes into a second tone. 也有. So it goes 也有. It changes into a second tone there. Instead of going 也有马, it just sounds weird. And as for multiple third tones, this is a common question we get as well. There's a couple of ways you can do it. 也有马. Like you can do it 2, 2, 3. Or you can do it like 3, 2, 3, like 也有马. But for me, for this particular one, I guess it would be 也有马. 他也有马. So second. But this kind of thing, it's just like 也有马, 他也有马吗? 他也有马吗? It's not something that you would need to consciously worry about. You just listen and repeat a ton, and you'll naturally know when to say multiple third tones in a row. Okay, so these sort of little things, I can't seem to get this tone combination right. I can't seem to get this grammar right. It's just like, it's a waste of time focusing on that. Worrying your, again, not you personally, just everyone, human beings, very, very weak conscious mind and very, very strong subconscious mind. So don't spend your time consciously trying to figure out stuff. You know, let the genius down here, wherever it is, like the smart part of your brain, just figure it out with enough exposure. Repeat, listen, repeat, read, repeat out loud constantly a lot, and you will absolutely just develop a sixth sense for it, just like native speakers do, just like you do with your native language. And finally, one more sentence just to finish off this magnum opus of a novel that I've written here with our with our characters that we've learned. 他也有. He also has. Yes, he does. Or yes, he also has a horse. So now you've learned basic Chinese reading in one video. What's the next step? Well, you eventually need to get to 3,000 characters if you want to take this language to a high level. And you could do that on your own. You could go the DIY route. You could watch videos on my channel. You could find an order of characters online somewhere, and you could just learn each character individually, kind of in a not ideal order, but you would get there, right? And then you'd have to make your own flashcards, and ideally flashcards with audio. So you'd have to use AI to sort of get the audio and put it all together. And then you have to learn thousands of words. And, you know, you need to see those words in example sentences. And it's going to be hard to find example sentences containing the words and characters that you already know. And you just learn a ton of characters, learn a ton of words, and then get comprehensible input. It's completely doable. But there's a faster way. You could check out our paid program, Mandarin Blueprint Pro, and we'll just take you step by step from 0 or whatever level you are now. Even if you're an intermediate level, you already know hundreds of characters. It suits you as well as beginners. You can just go through the course, learn 3,050 characters, 11,800 plus common Chinese words, enough to pass the highest levels of the HSK if you wanted to, enough to get to C1, even C2 level proficiency if you wanted to. And it's all just laid out for you step by step in like this perfect blueprint. And it also comes with an amazing paid community as well. And if you wanted to, you could just click the link in the description below and try the free version of the course first. So go get started and take your Chinese reading to the next level. But of course, reading is not all you need. In fact, just learning to read Chinese will not lead to fluency. To learn exactly what to do on top of reading to rapidly go from 0 or whatever level you are now to Chinese fluency, check out this video next.